Andy, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon on HSM Specials.
My pleasure.
I'm really, really excited to have a magician with us. I think this is a first, and really fascinating to hear you tell us about your ideas around magic as a metaphor for innovation.
Well, it's kind of interesting how it came to be. It's a process that is been incorporated by corporations around the world, but it's actually a process that I began learning when I was 10 years old.
How did that happen? What motivated you to learn to be a magician at the age of 10?
Well, I had an interesting challenge as a kid. I grew up and I had an uncle who was a magician and an uncle who was a magician, a musician and a magician. And my uncle, who was a magician, or actually my great uncle, he was my father's uncle, great uncle, used to take me into the magic shops in New York City. And I remember one day I came and he invited me on a Saturday morning to come into a magic shop. And it was one of the world's greatest magic shop. It was called the Flosso Horman Magic Shop. And in it was Mr. Flosso, the owner, who was probably one of the most famous magicians in the world. And he called me over. He was a little guy. He's about 5'2". He had these Coke rim glasses and a big top hat he always wore. And he called me over and he asked me to do it, or if I'd like to see a magic trick. So you're in the world's greatest magic shop. You know, this is where magicians buy their illusions to saw people in half and apparatus to make people float. So I said, yeah, I'd love to see a magic trick. And he pulled out a magic trick just like this. And what it is he had a top hat, which you could reach in if you want to reach in.
Nothing in there.
Nothing in there. Nothing in the top hat. And what he did is he took this. He has this die. You know, for me as a kid, it was a block with a lot of spots on it. And he put it in the hat. And then he opened up this this box. This is called. This is just a beautiful old wooden box. And he opened it up. And he told me that he was going to do something that was quite interesting, quite magical. And he then took the box. He took the die. And he placed it into the box, and he closed it up. And he shows me the die. He shows me the die. And at which point he then says to me, what side is the die on? And I'll ask you if you want.
Well, it's on this side.
It's on that side. At which point he goes like this. I hear a little noise, and he opens it up, and there's nothing there. So he says, I said to him, it's on this side. At which point he goes like that, and he opens it up, and it's not there. So you know, I'm kind of getting a sense because he's turning the box and I hear this clunk, you know, when he does it. So I figure that he's just basically, well, you know, kind of moving it around, right? So then I, you know, challenge him to open all 4 doors, and he says, well, kid, you know, it's. You know, he called me a kid at the time. I was a little kid. And he said, kid, well, this is, of course, there's nothing in the box. And he opens up the box, and he shows me that the box is completely empty. And he says, it's been in the hat the whole time.
Wow.
So what happened next really literally changed my life, because as a 10-year-old kid, all I wanted to know, how do you do that trick, you know? And as if reading my mind, he handed me this. This is called the die box, and he handed me this. And this became my first real apparatus to take and do magic shows with. But more importantly, what it did is it taught me the power of the assumption. Because magic is the understanding of human behavior and the assumptions that we make. And it's the goal of the magician to direct you to certain assumptions, which lead you away from the secret of the trick, which we call misdirection. Misdirection.
Yes, you talk a lot about the fact that magic challenges our assumptions. So talk to us a little bit today about how magic challenging our assumptions becomes a good framework to understand innovation.
Okay, to answer that, let me show you the opposite side of it, because the opposite side is, I mentioned, misdirection. And misdirection happens in business all the time. In business, we operate on our assumptions. We have to, otherwise we'd have to stop and think about everything we do. So, as we, particularly in this competitive environment, we are using our assumptions more and more readily. The trouble we get into is we begin to treat our assumptions as a set of truths rather than a set of beliefs, and that's where we end up misdirecting ourselves. So I like to do this as an example. This is Coca-Cola. This is a bottle of Coke. and I place a bottle of Coke here. And this is a trick I've been working on, and I'd like your opinion on. Well, I'll just show it. And you do this. Now, when I do it, most people aren't too impressed. I mean, most people have an assumption about that. They think, I guess, what I'm holding the excuse me, excuse me. You can see most people just assume that I'm holding the bottle upside down because I do have the Coke in it, and that's an example of just challenging assumptions. I know that's going to happen, so when it does, well, anyway. So Coca-Cola is a good example of that because Coca-Cola back in 1980 decided, or they needed to create a new product because of a dip in market share, and they created a new product called New Coke. They did their due diligence. They tested New Coke. In taste test, Coke won out. New Coke won out over old Coke. Well, they made the assumption that based on taste, or a consumer's preference for taste, was greater than the preference for the brand. And so they rolled out New Coke in 1980. They took the existing Coke off the marketplace. They rolled out with this New Coke. They spent millions of dollars, more money than any advertiser had ever spent before. And in 79 days, it was yanked off the shelf. Yanked off the shelf. Why? Because they made that assumption that consumers' preference for taste was greater than for their brand, and that was not the reality. They prefer the brand. Coca-Cola is the master at building the brand. So that's how you can misdirect yourself. Now, the power of the assumption can be used the other way. The power of the assumption can be used to quickly get you to find new solutions, and I like to illustrate it in this fashion. So this is, we have a coin here. If I place the coin here, the assumption is that the coin is in this hand, right?
Yes.
But if you were to challenge that assumption, what might you assume?
That it's in your left hand?
That it's in the left hand. That there is no coin in this hand. In essence, if you were to challenge that assumption, say, wait a minute, maybe there is no coin, maybe there is no coin, and to follow the other hand, you would discover that, yes, there is nothing in this hand, and the coin is still in the left hand. In essence, you would have discovered the secret of the trick or a solution that did not exist before. Let me show you again. So your life tells you that it's in this hand, but you challenge that assumption, you follow the other hand, you discover it's not there, and you discover it's still in the left hand. And that's the principle of using the power of assumption, to follow the other hand.